Hello and welcome to episode number 39 of the Hobbies and Happiness podcast, where we talk all about the hobby that makes us happy, tabletop gaming. I'm one of your hosts, Dan.
And I'm Jim, and today we're talking with a good friend of mine, Dwayne Cunningham.
So this week we are back to doing interviews. We talked about it weeks ago, actually, on the podcast of looking forward to 2022, kind of what's in store for us, and really kind of where we want to take this show. And this podcast, really. So this is kind of the first of the year, and we're gonna figure out kind of how we want to move forward. But really looking forward to this conversation. Jim and I sit down with, like he said, one of his friends, Dwayne, and we talk all things card gaming. And really, the bulk of the conversation is really centered around NFTs and cryptocurrency, and really kind of the correlations and relations that we see to NFTs and the tabletop space. So strap in for a really fantastic conversation. So hope you enjoy. All right. So today we are talking with Dwayne Cunningham, also known as Infidel 1258. Dwayne, how are you today, sir?
I am extremely well. I've had a long weekend in Canada. We have something called Family Day in British Columbia, where I live. And so I've been celebrating my day with my two beautiful daughters, my lovely wife, and we had some in-law visits and overeating on some yummy goodies. So it's been a good weekend.
That is very interesting. Why don't we have Family Day?
Yeah, I just learned about this the other day.
What is Family Day? So as an American, I've never heard of Family Day. What in the world is that?
Apparently it's because we hate families.
Well, that is a whole other topic for a whole other day. Yeah, but what is Family Day?
Honestly, it's a sort of special day that a borderline communist country comes up with because they want to, award every month its own special day. No, it's lovely, but it's nothing. It's not historic. It's really, I think it's maybe 10 years old. And my province, which is like your states, is I think one of the only ones that actually celebrates that particular day.
Oh, okay. Okay. Very cool. Very cool. Now, so Dwayne, before we get into it, can you tell us a little bit about who you are and just kind of what you're doing here on your little corner of the internet here?
Sure, man. So thanks for having me. Dan, nice to meet you. Jim, good to see you. And several things, I guess. First of all, I've got a YouTube channel. People probably know it's Dwayne Cunningham, and I go by Infidel 1258 on it. We cover Splinterlands a lot, and I do video content every day. I've been covering it for years, but more recently, people have really come to it. I'm particularly interested in several things, but video games is definitely one of it. Grew up loving games ever since Nintendo when I was 5 years old. And tabletop's been a really big interest of my life. Also, with some of my best friends, we just sit around and play games. Then I met this lovely lumberjack next to you, and he told me about what you guys are into, and just felt like it made sense to maybe sit down and have a chat about, whatever comes up. I'm excited to see where it goes.
All right, very cool. So, in kind of learning a little bit about you, going through your back catalog on YouTube, you talk a lot about finance and cryptocurrency. Kind of before we dive into that, you did mention Splinterlands. Splinterlands is kind of how you and Jim kind of met. For those that don't know, can you tell us a little bit about what Splinterlands is?
Sure. I'll try to give you like the 1-minute pitch that I gave to my friend this weekend. And it's essentially this. So it's a video game where you have a collectible card set and I have a collectible card set, and you might have different cards than I do. And we battle one another, putting forward our best team against one another. And the winner of each battle can receive a certain amount of reward. That reward can be paid out in cryptocurrency and separately and additionally in non-fungible tokens that are yours to keep. These are cards. Not everybody knows what NFTs are, but that's probably a whole other conversation. Non-fungible tokens are these assets that you can earn, and they can be really meaningfully valuable over a long time horizon due to their deflationary nature. And so it's a game that rewards you a little bit while you're having fun, and that reward can really snowball because of the type of reward you're receiving.
Okay, so yeah, like cryptocurrency and NFTs are like kind of a hot button topic now. I feel like
that's for sure.
And like I feel like there's definitely a lot of information out there. Probably some of it good and probably some of it not good. Me myself, I'm the type of person where I'm always trying to learn about kind of if I don't know something, I try and learn more about it. NFTs and cryptocurrency are something where I'm a little bit educated, but it's something to where I know I need to be more educated. So can you kind of speak to that a little bit as far as it being a hot button topic and kind of the things that you have heard? I'm sure you've probably heard both positive and negative things about it. Can you just kind of speak to kind of all the information that's out there and kind of like what's your take on just the overall sense of cryptocurrency and NFTs as it stands right now?
Okay, so definitely a very broad topic, but I have some ideas that would be meaningful for your audience and maybe for yourself, which is this, that I think when you look at the value proposition of cryptocurrency and non-fungible tokens, the idea is that they get compared against fiat currency or US dollar or Canadian dollar, which is printed literally every day and ad infinitum. Like there's no cap on that. In fact, when there is a cap, like there's a debt ceiling in America, they just vote every 2, 3, 4 years to just increase it. So it's entirely meaningless. And every dollar they print makes the buying power of each dollar before less, because if there's more dollars in circulation, that means every dollar is worth less. It can buy fewer resources. And this is why we get inflation. And this is what you've seen in your neighborhood. I know you have with housing and probably with fuel prices and with food and on and on and on. But then along comes cryptocurrency and non-fungible tokens. And in theory, the best versions of these things are limited in number when they're originally issued. Bitcoin has 21 million Bitcoins. And even Splinterlands, these non-fungible tokens, these cards, they're limited in number. Some cards will have 1,000 copies. Some cards will have more copies, some less. And in some cases, there can be perhaps a lot of copies, but there's never an infinite number. And that's really important because, again, you're measuring it on the basis of fiat value. You're comparing it to the meter stick of US dollars or maybe Canadian dollars. And that measuring stick is being broken or bent or ruined, if you want to say it. And that's why something like Bitcoin and non-fungible tokens are really interesting. But as a side note and an important kind of acknowledgement, there certainly are cryptocurrency coins and non-fungible tokens that are a total, I wouldn't touch them with a 10-foot pole. And usually that comes down to what is the use case and utility. And specifically around non-fungible tokens, you might have heard of, and maybe a viewer may have heard of Bored Ape. It's a type of non-fungible token, like little clip art that you might put on you would buy, and then you own it. And it's really prestigious right now in 2021, 2022. These things are selling for hundreds of thousands of dollars for one, I think you might call it a crummy piece of artwork, frankly, a little small picture of the face of an ape, a cartoon ape. And they sell for hundreds of thousands of dollars. And some of the biggest rappers and, celebrities are wearing them or are displaying them on their own kind of Instagram or their Facebook or whatever sites social media sites they're using. So there's this prestige element, but frankly, there's lack of utility with those. It's literally just a little cartoon ape. And so I would want to just finish that point and say there are some that are really useless and there are some that are interesting and they offer utility within, for instance, a video game, which is kind of cool.
So, are you familiar with Gary Vaynerchuk?
Yes.
Okay. So Gary V is probably
the biggest pusher.
And he is probably like where I've learned a lot about cryptocurrency and NFTs. Now, so. And I feel like this entire conversation is like already when you start talking about cryptocurrency and NFTs, that conversation is already at like a 7 or an 8, right? As far as like complexity. So if you had to explain cryptocurrency, and like I kind of want to just kind of get your take on this before we kind of go to like 9 and 10, which is kind of I feel like how it's going to go, and that's great. That's fine.
I think this is beyond a 10 complexity, honestly.
Right. But if you had to explain what is cryptocurrency and what is an NFT to somebody who has literally no idea of what they are, how would you go about doing that?
Okay, so I think most people know Bitcoin. Bitcoin is a digital currency that there are only so many of. There's 21 million copies of it, and each unit is divisible by, I think, 1 million points. And so it's like they call them Satoshis. Each Satoshi is one, I think it's 1/1,000,000th of a Bitcoin. I may be mistaken about that precise division, but the idea is that because of its limited nature, it theoretically holds its value, especially among a community of people who are willing to, and who have for like a decade now acknowledged that they're willing to exchange it for goods and services. And that's what we've seen. We've seen 10 years, maybe it's more now. It is more now, I think, that human beings have been trading this thing. And not only that, there's literally $700 billion of value stored in the Bitcoin blockchain, which is to say that there's a lot of people who trust it. And once you get over that hump of trust, what you find is that it's like gold, it's like silver, it's like anything that people are willing to barter with and use. And because of that, and like I said earlier, with the problem with US dollars and Canadian dollars being printed all the time, that's why it has a use case. That's why it has value, because it's not being printed all the time. It has a limited number, and that is very important. That's the same reason why people like gold. It's the same reason people like silver. Non-fungible tokens has a similar kind of story and a similar use case, and maybe a similar, will spark that similar interest in certain people. But non-fungible tokens, first of all, means fungible is a term that means that every unit is the same. So $1 is fungible with another US dollar. They're equal. Non-fungible is to say, like an apple is not fungible with a razor. They're totally different things. And so every NFT is distinct. Even in the game Splinterlands, there's, I don't know, 500 different cards, and one card will be similar maybe in some respects, but they're distinct and different. And as a result, they each carry a different utility and collectability, and therefore valuation. And so that's in a nutshell what those two things are, and maybe why they're even interesting. Because again, it all is underscored by the constant inflation of our dollars, and what that might do to our assets.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Very cool.
Does that answer the question?
Yes. Yeah. I think it does. I mean, I feel like there is a lot of misconceptions and honestly just misunderstandings going around with a lot of topics, honestly. But I feel like especially in the realm of cryptocurrency and NFTs, a lot of people just really don't know what they are and what they're really being used for. But I like NFTs. One thing that like Gary Vee says a lot, like he compares NFTs to like skins in a video game, right? It's something akin to that, to where, but you can actually own that. Like if you're playing Fortnite or whatever, and you have a skin for a character, you can actually own that skin. Or
CS:GO does this.
CS:GO does.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Counter-Strike.
Yeah.
You're able to buy skins for whether it's guns, knives, or whatever, and you can then use them inside the game. There's a marketplace on Steam that you could then also be selling your skins that you would have, or you'd go on a completely different website.
So the concept of NFTs, I feel like, has been around for a long time.
And then we also look at MTGO.
Yeah,
It's a digital card game.
Yeah, right.
I mean, Arena, you can't really sell this, but MTGO, there's a huge market for.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, go ahead, Dwayne. I feel like you're going to say something.
I was gonna. So I was just gonna say that the one distinction I would draw between some of those examples and maybe what we're starting to see now is that with blockchain you can have true ownership of these assets. And I'll tell you that I've been like I said, I've been a gamer for many years. I used to play Diablo 2, and I would spend real world money on getting some god gear loot, and I'm talking hundreds of dollars at a time when that was very meaningful to me. And that was. We could talk about how foolish that was, because it was, but just as a interesting takeaway in comparison. When I stop playing that game for 30 days or 60 days or 90 days or whatever it is, Blizzard just deletes my account because they don't have the server space for holding on to that. Those assets are gone forever. There's no recovering that. It's not, I can't get a refund. It's done. It disappeared. It's ether. But then you compare that to non-fungible tokens on a blockchain. And even if I don't love those Bored Apes, which I was kind of making fun of earlier, the thing is, it's still that person's. It's still a piece of artwork, and they might love that piece of artwork. And as you know, with artwork, it's all about subjectivity. They're willing to pay that, I guess, and they want to hold it. And then when you add to that interesting subjective, use case, the fact that it can have utility within a game, and that game can generate revenue, that's the kind of piece where I think the future of video games is going to be, one, on blockchain, and two, involving non-fungible tokens. Every game could benefit from this. I mean, any sort of RPG where your character is yours forever, and in a literal sense, you could sell the character after you've grind and put time into the development of that character, or some special sword that you can kill, the most powerful beast, and then it literally can track the history of that weapon. It's going to introduce so much new desire for collectibles that not only are kind of aesthetically pleasing, like those knives that you're talking about in CSGO or wherever else, but that actually add utility and that are yours to resell, which is super cool, I think.
Yeah, it's funny I mean, it's not funny because I think we've all been there when you talk about the Diablo spending hundreds of dollars on whatever that thing is. You've been there. Don't lie.
Diablo 3 had a real money market inside the game.
Yes, they did. Yes.
And then they got rid of it.
They got rid of it.
Like, oh, that's a big sad.
But however, you bring up that story, and it reminds me. I remember when the iTunes store and the whole digital world was really coming to life, and you started being able to have your movies or a TV show or your music. That was a revolution. Like having your music on the iTunes store. I mean, I always had the thought of, if I buy these things, the company says I own them, but if they go under, I'm losing all of this stuff. So I was always a big proponent of owning physical media, because if I own the physical media, I can have my own server. I can make it digital. For example, I have a Plex server. I have my own server here, which I have downloaded. I ripped my movies to, which I own physical copies of. But I was never the biggest proponent of just keeping everything on digital, because, again, if something bad were to happen, I'm liable to lose all of these things. Yeah. And that is, I feel like, a really good thing about NFTs, right? You have physical, I mean, not physical, but you have ownership on the blockchain. I'm still learning about the blockchain, by the way, but the concept makes logical sense to me, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, you know what? There's one thing that maybe we should add there too. One of the major criticisms or question marks for people's interest in stepping into this space can be around what you pointed out, which is that, with the CDs that you used to buy, as opposed to going on and buying audio off of maybe Apple or wherever. The people express that concern with the assets that are non-fungible tokens on a blockchain. They'll say things like, yeah, but what if the government comes and shuts that whole thing down? And I think there's a lack of understanding there, which is maybe worth spending a minute on, because it speaks to maybe the trust or the concerns, the interest. That would be a barrier for some people. And it's interesting to note that the way a blockchain works is the way a network works. And if you wanted to log into do a file sharing, I forget what they're called now. I haven't different Pirate Bay or something like this. There are different sites that at least used to exist where you could log in and you could download a song, a movie, or whatever, and then simultaneously while you're downloading it, somebody's uploading it or grabbing it off of you. That's that network connectivity is what we're dealing with when we get blockchains that are run on validators. So validators are usually just 10 or 20 or 50 or 100 different people that are running the blockchain simultaneously. And this happens with all crypto. Bitcoin has something similar. Those are the miners. Ethereum has something similar. and all of the most coins I think have this in some respect, and so that's the process where the network is being supported. And to the idea that it might just end one day is to suggest that the internet might just end one day. I mean, it's literally the same thing. And I mean, I guess China tries to do stuff like that, but then what happens? Like, people get phones and they use we find go rounds. So I'm not convinced that threat is maybe particularly legitimate, but it's worth touching on, because that would be a barrier for some people to even want to hear about what NFTs, or why would I play this game Splinterlands, or whatever else, anything in blockchain. That's a barrier for some people.
Yeah, and from my understanding, the blockchain is something that is completely independent of any government entity. I mean, honestly, any entity. It's all like you said, it's a network essentially of all of these devices essentially connecting to one another. So I think the government or anyone coming in and taking control, it's just, I don't think it's it's something that's actually possible to do. Again, my understanding.
They can make it illegal or something, but then that would all it would really do is make it hard for me to go to a store and cash in for USD or Canadian dollars. But they can't shut the blockchain down. That's what some people say, but that's not a reality.
Yeah, actually, here in the U.S., I want to say it was a couple of months ago. I was watching. It was on YouTube, but there were Senate hearings of people and representatives of these. I don't think they were Bitcoin companies, but they were people who were operating on the blockchain, trying to educate senators and representatives, people who have no understanding of the concept of a blockchain. And you could tell by the questions, because in the United States, how can I put this delicately? You're scared of what you don't understand, and right now there's a lot of misunderstanding, especially in government, of what the blockchain is. I mean, that's a whole other topic, and as humans, I feel like there's also a not a potential, but just a desire to control. There's a lot of desires to control in the entire world, right? But I've seen here in the United States, and they're trying to seize on the blockchain. I mean, maybe some of it's good intentioned, maybe some of it's ill intentioned, but I don't know. But
I also think that I was listening to some video or some article was being read. I think it was around like 4% of transactions that are happening on the blockchain have to do with something illegal.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's where a lot of the government is coming from is, well, all of these illegal things. But like you said, if it's 4%, that's a very, very small number, right? But so Dwayne, we're talking about like the blockchain and kind of how it operates. Probably the biggest criticism of the blockchain and NFTs that I've seen is energy usage and energy consumption. Can you speak to that a little bit? I mean, I've seen multiple articles and people slamming it. Mostly, like if the topic gets brought up, they just slam it immediately and say, "Oh, it uses too much energy. It's bad for the climate." Whatever the case may be. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I actually have a fair number of opinions on that. I guess the first thing is that there are different ways to run a blockchain. So that phrase blockchain came from Bitcoin, which is every 10 minutes there's a new block that's added. That block is a capture of all the transactions within that 10-minute period, and those are now locked and final and agreed upon across all of the network, and now it can't be changed. And that's why it's trusted. It's trustless, and that's the system of which that we're talking about here. But there are other ways to do that. There's something called IOTA, and it has a tangle system. A tangle system is like verified. This could get real complicated real fast, but I'm just going to say that there are different ways to validate from the data that's on a given chain. And that's really important to understand, because Bitcoin has one way of doing that, and that its mechanism for securing itself is through that the miners all trying to calculate the mathematical formula that will answer that block, and they'll be paid for the Bitcoin that's on that one, that comes from completing that one equation, and that locks up all that data, and allows us to move forward. That requires, and actually it almost demands that a ton of computers be used and that power be used toward supporting it. Because if there were, interestingly, the Bitcoin network is, I think, the biggest computing entity like in the world and in all of history. And that is interesting. That's actually not some people are really concerned about the power concerns, but that's actually a feature, not a bug. And I say it like that because you have to understand that the way that I told you earlier, there's $700 billion in Bitcoin. That could be taken if somebody's computing power was capable of outdoing the Bitcoin network computing power. And that's literally not possible because of how many computers are running, who are in agreement running that same network. And so it's like, that's just a really important, everything is a cost versus reward, right? The cost is, you're right, there's some concerns around the CO2 emissions that are coming out of maybe coal burning areas that are running the planets, like perhaps China, which is one of the big miners for Bitcoin. But like I alluded to, there are different ways to run that. Not all of them are so demanding. There's something called proof of stake, and that's more akin to what Hive does. That's the blockchain that Splinterlands is based on. And so there are different ways, and they are way, way, way more energy efficient. And so I would say anybody that is concerned about that component of it and who wants to kind of step away from cryptocurrency should at least explore proof of stake, which is an alternative, and a lot of major coins use it in part because of that concern.
Yeah, I recently saw an article where they were comparing. They were looking at how much energy was consumed by one transaction on a certain blockchain and compared it to the energy consumption of an entire household in, it was like somewhere in Europe, I think. And they said that it consumed as much energy as one household in 2 weeks. And you tell me if I'm wrong here, but the way I looked at it is my first thought was you need to be careful when looking at data, because you have to look at, well, what are they referencing? Like, what's their reference point? How are they getting that data? But the other thing too was when we're talking about energy consumption, we're moving in a more digital age now, and I think literally everyone is on the computer. Like, if you go in anyone's house, there's so many devices in their house. I mean, you look at my house, look at how many devices that I've got going here, right? So I'm very not optimistic. I'm cautious. I'm very cautious when looking at that data, because any statistician can really make the data look however they want it to look. And for people who really don't look close enough at the data, they can really be fooled and I'm not suggesting that's what was happening, but I'm just very cautious, specifically when it's something I don't fully understand. So my takeaway always is, before you jump to any conclusions, do research, and then do more research, and then even do more research on that. Especially when it's something that is so complicated and I want to say convoluted. It's very complicated, especially when there's all these data points.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. And because it actually, the whole conversation that we're having, it doesn't even become relevant or worth having from some people's perspective, because they don't first acknowledge the fact that the whole introductory comment that I made about inflation and about, what's happening with fiat currency. They don't see that problem. And so they don't see a need for a solution which is intrinsic to Bitcoin specifically and to blockchain broadly. If you don't acknowledge the problem of inflation, which is like, I think 7% in America last year by government numbers, which I don't really trust, to be honest. Like there's all kinds of that's a whole can of worms that we'd have to probably spend a half an hour on. But there is good reason to believe that the numbers are probably lower. They're being reported lower than they should. And so, if you don't acknowledge that that's a problem, then I don't know, maybe you couldn't go to the next step of saying, well, what could we do as a solution? Because like I said earlier, there is always a cost versus benefit analysis that has to happen when you're calculating these things. For instance, we're concerned about CO2 emissions, and so Tesla has been blowing up, and everybody wants an electric vehicle. But there's a cost benefit analysis, if you're being honest with yourself, which is that there's all kinds of like rare earth metals that are required for those batteries, that they come out of certain parts of the world. What's happening to that land? What sort of labor is being used to acquire those? And then where's the power coming from once you get that e-car? Like how are you charging it? Do you live in a place that burns coal to get electricity into your city? Then you're using coal power to power your vehicle. So there's, if we're really looking at things in a detailed and honest manner, there's so many layers that you need to peel back to fully understand the cost benefit. And people don't always want to go there.
Yeah, all of these conversations are always more complicated than what people make them out to be. And honestly, as humans, we try to simplify things as best we can because I mean that's our nature. That's what we try and do. But to your point, if we're really honest with ourselves first and foremost, but then also one another, I think we'd all have to acknowledge that all of these conversations are more complicated and more nuanced than any one of us really and truly let on to what they are. Just like that whole thing with electric vehicles. I mean, the only thing that I would say to the electric vehicle point is, I mean, I'm right there with you. How are you getting your power that you're putting into your vehicle? The other thing too as well is, electric vehicles aren't putting into the atmosphere the CO2 that gas powered vehicles are, but that point that you just said is often ignored when talking about these conversations, and I think that's a shame because again, we're not being 100% honest with each other, honestly. Now, do you think NFTs are a get rich quick scheme? I've seen that. I've seen that a lot.
I think some are. I think most are.
So Jim's right. Some are being sold that way, but those are the ones I would personally go nowhere near. And so when I watch videos where it's like, this thing's going to blow up in, the next 2 weeks, or they say, look how much I made like in the last week or so, those are the ones where you really need to run, because it can be very exciting to see what someone else has done. This is why, all of the commercials that we get on social media, at least the ones I see, investment advice commercials, are usually like, this guy made 10,000, this guy made 50. And it's always anecdotal examples where somebody's really hit it big. But I mean, Splinterlands in particular is a video game where you're going to be paid, depending on if you buy the $10 account and nothing else, you might be paid, what would probably amount to, I'm going to say like 50 cents a week. That's a guess. I haven't done the calculations recently, but interestingly, those assets, the 50 cents, if it was 50 cents a week, interestingly, those are the cards, like I said earlier, are non-fungible tokens, and they're deflationary in nature. And so if you bought that $10 account and if you played the game enjoying it for 4 years, which is kind of the time horizon for a bull market within cryptocurrency, starting today and going for probably another 4 years, half an hour a day. This is kind of my story, by the way. You would find that any assets you did accumulate during that playtime would end up being worth more across that time horizon, across a long enough time horizon, because of their deflationary nature. Now, does that make it a get rich quick scheme? No, absolutely not. Like, it's a few pennies that ends up snowballing into something bigger, and you can end up being very surprised by what you've accumulated. But it would take financial investment to get it to a place where it was going to be really astonishing or really kind of life changing. And so just one more note, my story is one where I put in about $5,000 and it's blossomed into a lot, but it was $5,000 plus 3.5 years of playing the game and enjoying it along the way and making trades that really extracted, that sold high and sometimes and bought low. So it was neither easy nor short term. It took a lot of attention and time, and it led to something big.
Now, do you have a background in finance?
Just like a layperson, like honestly. So in 2008, I got married in 2008, and I watched the crisis unfold, and I learned about quantitative easing, which is a very interesting concept. If the viewers don't know, but holy cow, like the idea that they're just going to print money to try and pull the economy back up when it's fallen. That's in a nutshell what it is, and it's just I thought to myself, they're buying, like they're essentially paying off the debts of the people who put us in this place, like some of the biggest banks, and they're doing it again. And it's like, that to me was a slap in the face and a wake up call where I was like, oh, like my Canadian currency and US dollar is really only goes one way. It goes down and down and down in value, because even if it's 2% a year, which is what they say it is, every year that's compounding 2% over 10 years. It's not 20%, right? It's more than that, because it's 2% and then 2% on top of it.
2.0
and so
for
I just
year.
started pouring over all kinds of material online as a result of that. And I've spent years kind of studying inflation and gold and silver and cryptocurrency because of it.
So you hear that, people? You don't have to go to college. You don't have to go to school to learn literally anything.
It's on YouTube, honestly.
You can learn whatever you want if you just sit down and put in the time. Like, yep. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Anytime I hear anybody say something like that, to where they took it upon themselves, they didn't know something and they researched and learned it on their own, that's awesome.
Yeah, Dan, I tell my kids that a lot. Like, I've got 7- and 5-year-olds, but I tell them, and my nephew, who's I think 10 now, and it's like, what are you going to be when you grow up? Well, I think I'm going to go to school for this or go to school for that. And it's like, I try to encourage them that hands-on skills are in some ways it's the most important thing. And you can learn these things. You don't need some person with, a certain type of jacket standing in front of a room to explain these things. It's literally the power of the internet. And it's so beautiful because there's democratization of knowledge. Like the world can learn this, and increasingly India and Africa and some of the poorest nations in the world who have access to the internet through cell phones, which is a growing access point. It's going to unlock so much knowledge, and transform so many lives, if we're paying attention to it, if we're trying to use the tool. And so, yeah, man, for sure. I agree.
Yeah. And then and the only thing that I would say too, and I always make sure that I point this out too, is yes, you can learn anything, but also anybody can put anything on the internet too. So when you are learning and when you are researching, take everything. I don't want to say take everything with a grain of salt, but again, be very cautious. Be open-minded. But be cautious and double check like what you're researching. If you find
research on your research,
exactly.
Yeah,
I mean that's very, and that's, to me, that's a very basic thing. But the unfortunate thing is that is not very basic. Is like, that's not taught.
Totally.
And people don't say that. So I want to make sure that I'm saying that, yes, learn on your own, but corroborate. Make sure what you're finding is truth, is the true thing.
So true.
Yeah, so thank you for that. That's awesome. All right, so we've talked a little bit about your tabletop experience. I enjoy hearing other people like Diablo. That's awesome. I can't wait for Diablo 4, assuming that comes out.
Yeah.
And then we got Diablo Immortals on the phone.
Do we?
Do you guys not have phones?
Do we?
Do you guys not have phones? I don't know when that's coming out.
If you're not familiar, just go look it up. I don't want to spoil your fun.
I don't even know what BlizzCon that was. 2018, 2019?
It's been
one of
forever.
those two.
It's one of those.
Yeah.
But anyway, so tabletop gaming. Tell us a little bit about your tabletop experience and kind of how tabletop has had an impact on your life.
So, ever since I've been married, like I said, 2008, my wife and I have always loved games, and we'll play. We used to host potlucks, and we would have friends come over and we'd play board games of all kinds. And that's been a big part of our social life. And things have changed a little bit over the few years. You know, we get to have kids, and then, a lot of world events in the last couple of years have affected what that looks like. But it's still an important part of my life, and I'll meet with the guys probably at least once a month, and we'll just do an all-nighter where we're going to get into something. And Lord of the Rings Living Card Game is a game that I personally invested in quite a bit. Like, again, it's one of these collectible card games where you're gonna I spent probably $1,000 on different expansion packs and whatnot, and I just love the card art, and I love the getting into. I love Tolkien, first of all. I love Lord of the Rings, everything to do with it, and then getting into the like, I'm like, oh, I remember when he said that line in the book, or and then we'll get into a conversation about how the movie was slightly different than the book, and so it's like the whole immersive feel. And then I started going to Penny Arcade Expo, which is I don't know if you know what it is, but it's an event that happens in Seattle, Washington, in, I want to say, like Texas and Australia. And what it is it's video game and tabletop, everything to do with it. So there's like all the new games of both varieties. It's an exhibit, you go walk through, you meet some of the developers, you try these things out. Mm-hmm. It's really fun, or at least it used to be. I haven't been in years, but that was one of those other experiences where we would stay. Me and 6 guys would be crammed into a hotel, and all day long, we're at the exhibit playing the games. All night long, we're, at the hotel getting into more of it. And so Lord of the Rings Living Card Game, more recently Fallout. Settlers of Catan is a huge one for me. I have probably 50 different games right beside me here, but it's just like, and the other day we even had we had a party, and we were throwing around different things like categories and who knew, but those, a little bit more simplistic, but I love it. Risk, Axis and Allies, so many amazing games that I've spent my whole childhood playing for hours and hours and hours.
So you talk about Lord of the Rings Living Card Game, fantastic game. And then last week on the podcast, we talked all about expandable and living card games, that type of format. Now, did you ever get into any of the trading card or collectible card games like Magic, Pokemon? I mean, there's a ton of them out there, but did you ever get into any of those at all?
No, honestly, Dan, I kind of missed that. I watched Digimon, the cartoon, but I felt like it was a secret pleasure when I was a kid. I was at an age, these things came out when I was at an age where I was like, I was trying to be cool, and I cared about what people thought. And so I wasn't playing any of it, but I was watching Digimon, and I loved it. And then years went by, and I guess I got more comfortable with myself, and I started diving into Lord of the Rings, and now I read them all the time. And then I heard about that, and my buddy got me into that game. So, but no, I missed most of those, most of the big ones. And I feel like Splinterlands is my late entrance to that world, because it feels very similar in some respects.
Honestly, Digimon was cooler than Pokemon.
Yeah, it was. And I we laugh about the, trying to be cool, but that was all of us. I mean, come on.
Everyone.
I didn't want anybody to know that I was a nerd. I mean, I didn't want to, I wanted to be, I'm a cool kid. No, I wasn't a cool kid.
I was open about like all my stuff I played.
Not me. Not me. In fact, I wasn't
I want my friends to also be playing these games as well.
Yes. Yep. I realized that too late.
Yeah.
I realized that when I got to after college, actually.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it took me a while to figure that out. Okay, so but you touch on Lord of the Rings and the living card game. And honestly, like everything that you pointed out, the theming, the talking about the line of how it's different from the books or the movie, kind of, what if you had to pick, like, what was your favorite part about Lord of the Rings, the card game? Like, was it the art, the theming, or just the joy of playing a card game?
Storytelling.
Yeah.
It was probably the storytelling or like the immersive experience that it offered me, like to step into the world in a way, in a deeper way. So like I've read like I said, I've read the books many, many times. I've watched the movies many, many times. But then to put things together, like there's a card that I think about sometimes. I think it might be called like three hairs or something like that. And in the movie to a little bit and the book to a greater extent, there's this whole exchange between Galadriel and Gimli, and he is smitten with her, and he seems to, like, I don't know if he loves her or if he wants to have a relationship with her or something like that. There's nothing. It's a beautiful exchange where he expresses the most respect he could possibly to her, and understanding that this is a moment in a world where elves and dwarves hate each other, and she is distrustful, or ought to be, as the queen in this context. This dwarf has come into the forest at that time. I forget exactly where they met, but it shouldn't be a positive experience, but it is, and it's a beautiful moment where at the end, when he's leaving with the rest of the group, he said she gives a special gift to every one of them, and every one of the companions, and she offers Gimli. She's like, what would you like, Gimli? And he says, oh, like, I couldn't take anything. Like, it was just like a wonderful to meet you kind of thing. And she insists, and he brazenly asks for a strand of her hair. And he said, and I think I forget who it is, but one of the other elves there, like, wants to kill him for this request. And it's such a powerful exchange. But he's so innocent and genuinely respectful in the moment. And he's like, I only asked because you made me ask. Like, I know it, I shouldn't ask. And she gives it to him. And no, she asks what he would do with it. And he's like, I would put it in the most fine jewel, and I would treasure it for generations. It's such a touching and wonderful moment. And it's one of those moments where why I love Tolkien and why I love Lord of the Rings. And then there's a card about it in the game, and it helps Gimli. And it's like, this is the world I know. And it's like, I remember that moment, and and it conjures up all this excitement for the deep lore that can be unpacked in a very deliberate and immersive manner in a game like that.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite things just about living card games, and it's more so living card games, because when we talked last week about the kind of the differences between living and expandable, where they kind of are the same thing. But with the living card games, those were very much narrative driven. And you really can't get that experience that you were talking about really in any other kind of game. And honestly, if you've never played a living card game, there's three that we've talked about before: the Lord of the Rings, Marvel Champions, and Arkham Horror. Marvel Champions is much less narrative driven, but it's still there. But Lord of the Rings and Arkham Horror, the narratives within the game are so immersive. And if you've never experienced it, really, as a card game player, you really, really should. I mean that what you just said is fantastic.
Also, what he was going on, it kind of brings me back to Disney Villainous.
I was thinking the same thing too.
And,
yes,
because it was like, he was talking about the three hairs card or whatever it was, and I'm just like, all right, I know this Disney movie, and all the cards are something from that movie.
Yeah.
And after we watched the what was that?
Great Mouse Detective.
Yeah, that one. I was like, oh my goodness, this is great.
You
sure, it's
can't-
not as in depth and
Right.
carrying on a campaign,
Yes.
but they still do a really great job in terms of like, oh, I know where this was from, and it makes perfect sense.
And I don't think you can get that type of experience outside of a tabletop environment.
Yeah.
You really can't. I mean, what Dwayne talked about, what you've just talked about, that is why I love tabletop. And honestly, that's why I love card games too. Because like you said, Dwayne, like it's on that card. Like it's that moment that they're they're literally telling that story. And I think it's beautiful. I really, really do.
And they know how so the people who make these things love the game or the movie, the lore, the books,
The source
and
material.
know that as a fan, you can feel their expertise and their gentleness with the material, and that is such a pleasure to explore.
For sure. And anytime a developer or a publisher or designer takes on a material such as Lord of the Rings or really any other large IP, if they get it wrong, their fans will let them know about it.
That happens so much in like those the movies that they'll take from like video games or whatever it is and then turn them into a live action thing or an anime, whatever it is, and they're just like, how did you mess up that name?
Yeah. Where's
Where's the real Cortana? Where is, whatever it is? Why is Master Chief so small?
Are either of you fans of Jack Reacher at all?
I don't know what that is.
So
No.
Jack Reacher is a character from a series of books called The Killing Floor, I believe. But it's
I like the game Killing Floor.
not like the game.
Oh, okay.
But there's a recent show on Amazon Prime called Reacher. Okay, there were movies called Jack Reacher years ago. And honestly, I loved the movies. When I watched the movies, I was not familiar with the source material. Rarely am I familiar with the source material, I feel like, honestly. But hey, it's joy about finding these new characters, new IPs, and learning more about them. So when those movies first came out, the main character was led by Tom Cruise. So Tom Cruise was Jack Reacher. I believe there were 2 movies. They really were good movies. I enjoyed them. Now, with this new series that came out, the actor playing Jack Reacher is Alan Rickman. I believe it's pronounced Rickton, but he was Aquaman.
Isn't that Snape?
No.
What was that?
He's
What was his
passed
name?
away.
I know, but what was his name? Alan something?
I can't remember. I've got the face, but I can't remember the name. But anyway, he was Aquaman in Smallville. But he's a big guy. He's big, stocky. He's really funny. He's a good actor. But I come to find out that was the character Jack Reacher. He was a big, daunting. He's a big, daunting guy. And so come to find out when those original movies came out, the fans of the Jack Reacher books were not very happy that they cast Tom Cruise because Tom Cruise is a very small guy. Good actor, but he's very, very small. So the fans let them know. The fans let them know about it. So that's there we go. Alan Rickman.
That was close.
You were close. Yeah, Alan Rickman. There we go. I knew it.
Yeah.
I knew it. It was on my tongue. So okay. So we talk about these living card games, right? And just card games in general. And then I see a very real correlation between card games in general and kind of our mentality as card game players, because honestly, like I would classify myself as a card game player, as a card gamer. I think you probably would too.
Yeah.
Most of this is semantics, honestly. But it's just really the type of games that we enjoy. But as a card game player, I really see correlations between card games and NFTs. Is that intentional? Maybe not, probably not. But I mean, Dwayne, do you kind of see do you see correlations between NFTs and card games?
Yeah, I think the better ones. And I think Splinterlands is one that is trying to draw that comparison and that connection. I don't know if the developers used to love Magic. I don't know what their backstory intimately is, but it seems to me that the game is really one where it reminds me a lot of Lord of the Rings living card game, where there's new expansions that come out semi-regularly. It seems like every couple of years there's a main expansion set that comes out, and when that comes out, it's gonna create ripples in the meta. It's gonna create interesting new decks you can build. It's gonna create new challenges you have to learn to overcome as a player, and then there's an evolution of rule sets. The rule sets are little modifiers to the game rules that you need to play within from battle to battle that can change the outcome of each match. And so it feels very much Lord of the Rings living card game, and how if you're playing in Mirkwood, it's one thing. If you're playing in, like, I don't know, I can't remember the other names of the different missions, but there's lots of missions, and each mission has its own parameters and its own rule sets. Mm-hmm. So it feels very much like that sort of vibe. And then you might buy more of the cards and then unlock more of the utility, or you might not, and maybe you just go with the core set. And if to carry the analogy forward, that's the $10. That's a $10 account is the core set, and then anything else on top of that is going to unlock, I guess, extra utility. But yeah, I do see I see a direct relationship there.
We're buying singles and Splinterlands, so
So I think card games really are the perfect use case for NFTs. Yeah. I personally, like, I think it's a match made in heaven. Like, not like just to use the term.
Yeah.
But I really feel like NFTs in card games really were meant for one another. Mm-hmm. Like, I feel like that's kind of, there's a lot of use cases for NFTs, but I just feel like card games are like the perfect one for them, for sure.
It's definitely one of them. I come from like a huge MMO RPG background, right? So I'm thinking like, okay, this one legendary weapon that drops from, whatever raid boss it is, there can only be 500 or however many there are. Yeah. And it's like, all right, well, now that one legendary weapon I can now sell to someone else, or however they go about getting it. Okay, that's another thing for the NFT. Or you could have really powerful allies that you can take with you on like an adventure or whatever. Or it can be a house. All the furniture inside your house, inside this game as well, could then just also be NFTs. So everything I know from MMOs, it's just like, all right, well, now let's turn it into NFTs, and now I can actually sell this stuff for real money. But it's weird because there's a lot of pushback from the MMO community that they don't want a lot of they don't like NFTs.
Really?
Yeah, because there's a lot of rug pull with some of these businesses, and NFTs in general, I think, are overall kind of scammy, right?
Yeah.
He was talking about the Bored Ape Yacht Club.
Yeah, right.
Just recently, there was a YouTuber by the name of Bradley Martin, who is a just like a workout YouTuber influencer.
Okay.
So he's like really jacked. So he was out trying to push these jacked apes. And just recently, the people who were in control of everything pulled out millions of dollars.
Really?
Yeah. So it caused the price of it to completely tank. It was called like jacked apes.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So
yeah, crypto is like rife with that, because we're still the Wild West at this point. Like most people, I'd say 5 out of 10 people don't have a clue about cryptocurrency, about blockchain, and like probably 3 out of 10 they have some grasp of it, and probably 2 out of 10 really get it. And so that's a huge barrier for, and again, it starts with most people don't really even believe that there's a need for this sort of thing because of that beginning conversation we had. And so these are the barriers standing between us and I guess wider, broader adoption for Bitcoin and for other cryptocurrencies. And that is when that begins to actually unfold, that's when there'll be increased security and safety in the space. It will never be perfect because people will always try to rip each other off, but there'll be increased safety and accountability as we get more and more mainstream. Here's the problem. The opportunity, the life-changing financial opportunity is kind of in front of us. If we want it, and again, that's not being said to try and excite somebody into making a rash decision. When I felt this way, that's how I felt 4 years ago. And then I spent like maybe a year deep diving into cryptocurrency. And so if anybody's listening to me and feeling like I'm saying something that is maybe exciting them, and they're like, I probably should get into this thing. I've been thinking about it for a while. Not unless you understand it, because I could tell you at least a handful of nightmare things that happened to me personally because of that growing knowledge and because of the some of the holes and hazards in this space 4 years ago and probably even today. And so take your time, investigate, but it is a life-changing financial revolution. And I do believe it's not going anywhere. And so it really is in everyone's best interest to take it seriously now in terms of looking into it. And that's all I would say. Just look into it, begin to understand blockchain, begin to explore non-fungible tokens, especially those that have utility.
So you just answered the question I was going to ask. What advice would you give someone who is looking to get into this? So, I mean, you spoke on that beautifully. But I think the final thing that I'd like to ask you here is, you just talked about as someone who came into this 4 years ago. So you've got where you were 4 years ago, where you are now. Where do you see kind of not just the NFT space going here in the near future, but more specifically like Splinterlands? Like, what is are you hopeful for the future of Splinterlands and NFT card gaming, really?
Yeah, I am. I really believe that this game, the Splinterlands in particular, has survived a bear market and that it is positioned to thrive in the next bear market. And I think the cryptocurrency, when I say bear market, I mean the downtime in the cryptocurrency market. There's bull cycles, which are where everything's up, and there's bear markets where everything's down. This game has survived that cycle once already. It's poised and capable of doing it again. That's an important distinction that separates it from many other operations out there. Additionally, I find the game fun. That's so important. I'm not playing something to grind it out to get some, cryptocurrency that because I want that token. I'm playing a game I like, and I have played it for years. I played it for 3.5 years, I think now, every day. Not because it gives me rewards, but because I like it. And then incidentally, it gives me rewards. And those rewards, like I said, are trivial in nature. Even at the highest levels, you're going to get a couple dollars a day, but it would take a ton of assets to be at that high level. So it's really trivial rewards on a daily basis. But if you understand blockchain and if you understand deflationary assets, then you're going to begin to recognize the fact that accumulating those assets will snowball your account because they will appreciate over a long enough time horizon. So I believe strongly that Splinterlands is here to stay. I believe that it's fun and entertaining. I believe that it's reasonable to play, like to get started with the game. And I think anybody who wanted to try and do it for $10 could do it and could have fun and could make over the next 4 years, you're going to make a shocking amount of money from a video game that costs you $10. It might be just a few $100, but what game is giving you anything, right? You go play Diablo for several hours and you've got nothing to show for it. Most games, Hearthstone, like most games, they don't give you anything that you can personally value from. My friend just today sent me a message in Discord showing me, and he plays at silver, which is I don't know if you know this, Dan, but it's bronze is the low level, silver is the next level. And so it's like, he's a low level player and he dropped a gold foil legendary card in his rewards. And that's like $100 that he just got randomly from playing a game he's enjoying anyways. And that's the opportunity in front of people who are recognizing it and who are willing to, but first and foremost, those who are enjoying it. Don't even forget about the opportunity. If it's not fun, don't bother. But I say it is fun.
That's awesome. You mean to tell me I can like have an account for like $10 and get a card that's worth $100? That's kind of cool.
It can take a little bit of time.
Yeah,
but
right,
yes.
right. Well, that's awesome. So Dwayne, if people want to see your content, where can they find you and your content?
So I'm on Twitter at Time and Attention, and we talk about family, finance, faith. Those are my 3 interests. And then with a focus on Splinterlands, and then on YouTube, just Dwayne Cunningham. And that's my channel name, but my in-game name is Infidel1258. So if anybody wonders, that's where that comes from.
Well, awesome. Dwayne, that was I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I can see why Jim said we had to talk to you. So thank you very much for being here. This is a fantastic conversation. I know I learned a lot.
I definitely learned a lot.
Well, that's good. And I hope our audience got something out of this conversation, which I think they will. So Dwayne, thanks so much for being here. And we hope to talk to you again soon in the future.
Yeah, man. I really appreciate it, guys. Thank you for having me on. Have a great night, guys.
All right. Jim, that was a fantastic conversation.
Yeah,
that was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So rewinding a little bit, a few months ago, Jim had talked to me and told me that like I needed to talk to his friend Dwayne, and that he's a really knowledgeable guy and really interesting. And yeah, Jim, you were right.
Yeah. When he was going over some of this stuff, like I'm a little bit into crypto and NFTs, right? And when he was saying like 3 out of 10 people and 2 out of 10 people are really into it, 3 out of 10 being like a little bit into it, I was definitely just a little bit into it. When he was going more in depth, I'm like,
yeah. Well, yeah. When he was talking about like 3 out of 10 people have like a kind of a basic understanding of it, I'm like, I think that's me. Like, I think I have a decent grasp on the concept and what it is. I can't talk anything more specific, but that's probably, it was like 4 out of 10 or 3 out of 10. Like maybe I'm not even a 3 out of 10. I don't know, but all I know is I don't know enough. And
I'm just sitting here like 5 out of 4 people are bad with fractions. Okay. That's where I'm sitting.
All I know is after that conversation, I am like one rung better than where I was. That's all I know.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're back. We're back to doing these interviews. What did you think? Let us know what you thought of that conversation. I know NFTs and cryptocurrency really is a hot button topic. What are your opinions? Like, what do you guys think of NFTs and cryptocurrency? If you could probably tell from that conversation, we're very open. We're open-minded about just the whole concept in general. And honestly, I always end on, I need to learn more. I don't know enough and I need to learn more. I'm very open-minded about these types of things. But where do you fall? What do you think about NFTs and really how it relates to the tabletop space?
I think it's the future of gaming as a whole. Really?
Yeah, I do too. And like I said in that conversation, I'm always going to default to wanting something physical in my hand. And really, when we're talking about tabletop, I think that's how a lot of people in the tabletop space, how they're going to feel too, where they want to be sitting around a table. And, we talk about it a lot when this conversation about tabletop and digital games, right? So I think that was a fantastic conversation, and the conversation is not going away.
Yeah.
You can talk, if you're one of those people who doesn't think highly of it, you can try to disregard as much as you want. It's not going away. That this whole topic, this whole conversation is not going away. So going off of that, really, what do you think? We'd love to have this conversation. We want to know what your thoughts, what your opinions are, and really kind of just get the gauge of the community, kind of know where you guys are at. So let us know, leave us a comment, leave us a review, shoot us an email. We would definitely, we're always open to having these conversations and honestly learning more. So,
there was one other thing I was just thinking about.
Sure.
So, all right. We want to sit in at a table playing these games with people, right? Eventually, we're going to get to the point where it's just, we're going to be in VR, sitting around whatever it is, right? and then you're going to have your friends around a virtual table. And then you're just like, oh, let me go in my inventory right quick, bust this game out. And then, well, now we're just playing Magic in VR.
Okay, Ernest Klein.
Eventually.
If you haven't, go read Ready Player One's fantastic book.
We'll get there.
We probably will at some point.
Probably in our
will.
lifetime, yeah.
I would not be surprised.
So there on Steam, a game called Zenith, the like first VR MMORPG came out recently.
Okay, all right.
I don't have a VR headset.
Yeah, me neither.
I need to get one.
I probably need to get one too, but anyway. All right. Well, we could continue that. Honestly, we could continue this conversation.
Yeah. All right. Let's get on here. All right. Let's go.
So, Jim, where can people find you on the internet?
Yeah, you guys can find me on Twitter, Twitch, Instagram at Jim Morgan HNH.
You can find me on Twitter at _DG Campbell and on Instagram at daniel.g.campbell. You can find Hobbies and Happiness on just about every social media platform as well. Hobbies.n.happiness. So this was a great conversation. Looking forward to the next conversation we have and the next interview. I'm looking forward to next week.
And if you guys are interested in Splinterlands, we'll actually leave a link down below.
Yeah, we'll definitely leave that information for you as well. I'm not spoiling what next week is, but I am really looking forward to next week, and I know you will, and I know you will be too. So, all right, well, with that, thanks everybody for being here, and we will catch you in the next episode. See you, everybody.
Take care.